Good morning. We're starting the new parak and that Kuf Vav Amud Aleph. Learning is a chusr for Shlema for Ilana Chaya Bas Sarah. Zok the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about, we often talk about the Isser of Hayt. We talk about Yotze. If you take parts of the animal out, parts of the carbon out, it parcels the carbon. Now we're talking about the lav of not just taking portions of the carbon out, but of doing the carbon, of doing the avoidus of the carbon bachot. It's going to be certain avoidus of certain karbanos. So the first thing the Mishnah tells us is the basic din. Hashoichet v'hamala b'chutz chayiv al ashrita v'chayiv al halal. The Tanakhama says, if someone shechts outside of the yazara, he's supposed to shecht in the yazara. Shechts a carbon, or if he's mala, he's going to define mala, it's going to end up being burning the carbon, burning the emurim on a mizbeach, or being zerek the dam on a mizbeach bachutz, outside of the proper place, outside the base of Mikdash or the Mishkan. You're going to be chayiv for each one of those things. Rabbi Yisrael Glili says, the way you said it, I have to object to it. You're saying you'll be chayiv for shechting v'chutz, and then also a separate chayiv for being mala, for being zarek the dam b'chutz after you did the shechita b'chutz, or burning the emurim b'chutz after you did the shechita b'chutz. He says no. It's only if you shechted b'fnim and then you hella b'chutz, then you chayiv for being mala b'chutz. Shachat b'chutz v'hella b'chutz potter. But if you did the shechita b'chutz, so at that point, what you have is not a carbon anymore. What you have is something you shechted b'chutz. It's not a kosher or carbon. So then when you go to be mala b'chutz, potter, then you potter. Shalei hella, you potter for the halah. Shalei hella ala davar pasel. Because it was already paseled by the shechita b'chutz. So now when you're trying to be mala a carbon, you have to be mala a carbon that's kosher. This carbon was already paseled at an earlier stage, so you won't be chayiv for doing both of them b'chutz. You're only chayiv if you did the shechita b'fnim properly, and then you brought the dam outside, or you brought the emurim outside, and you try to do the hakrava b'chutz. Amrullah, the Chum said back to him, what you're saying makes no sense. So what are you saying? You're saying the only case where you have halah that you're chayiv on is that you did that shechita b'fnim, and now you want to do the rest of the carbon, which is either zrikas dam or the haktaras emurim, burning the emurim. You do that b'chutz, then you're going to be chayiv for this lav of being mala b'chutz. But he says you're saying that it can never be that you were sheichet b'chutz, which you could be chayiv on individually on its own, and then you were mala b'chutz because it already got pasaled by the shechita. The Chacham said back to him, anytime you shecht b'fnim, and then you bring let's say the dam, or you bring the emurim outside, they become pasal anyway. From bringing them outside itself pasals them. So before you get to the point of being mala them, of being zayrik the dam, or burning the emurim b'chutz, you're already dealing with a pasal of carbon because you took it outside. Just you're taking it outside, the actual emurim or the actual dam passes it. So what difference does it make whether you shechted it b'fnim or shechted it b'chutz? You're saying if you shechted it b'chutz, it's already a pasul carbon. Even you shechted b'fnim, it's going to be pasul before you get to the hakrab. That's the Chacham's cheshbon. The second part of this Mishnah is referring to a totally different topic, but it has the same structure, the same type of disagreement. Hatome she'achal ben kodesh, Tome ben kodesh tar. A tome, someone has tumas haguf, he's not allowed to eat kachim. Whether he eats kachim that the kachim themselves are tome, which you're not allowed to eat kachim that are tome, and ben kodesh tar, he's going to be chayiv. The Tanakhama says you're going to be chayiv for eating kachim with tumas haguf, even if the person is tame, he's going to be chayiv even if the kachim themselves are tame. For eating, in this case, there's a difference in the lav. That means eating kachim that the basar of the kachim became tamei is not chayiv karas, but eating kachim while you are tamei is chayiv karas. So the Tanna Kama says, if someone who's tamei eats kachim that they themselves are tamei, he's going to be chayiv. Certainly, if he eats kachim that are tar, he's going to be chayiv. Basically, says no. Only a tamei that ate something that's tar is chayiv. Tamei she'achol tamei pater, but a tamei that ate kachim that became tamei, he's going to be pater for the din of tumas haguf, which is chayiv kares. He's only going to be chayiv. Of course, he's going to be chayiv for eating kachim that became tamei, but that is only a lav. It's not. That's not a chayiv kares. What's the reason? Because this was anyway tamei from before, so it doesn't make a difference that he also himself was tamei. Since the object was tamei, he's not going to get the more serious chiyuv of eating while he himself is tamei. He says, they said back to him, yeah, the same kind of time like we had before. Every time a tamei eats something that's tar, kivin shenaga, by as soon as he touches it, tameyu, he makes it tamei. And nevertheless, there certainly has to be. We know there is such a din that someone who's tamei tumas haguf that eats a carbon that is tar, he's chayiv kares. And now the Gemara explains. The Mishnah just gives us the background that we really should have known from before. A tamei tar that eats tamei, someone who's tar who eats a piece of carbon that's tamei, he's potter from kares. He's only chayiv tumas haguf. Taisus asks an interesting question, which I don't know if it occurred to you. Taisus says, "Kivin shenaga by timeu, avagav the mishkachas lo k'shetochav lechaver beisabliya." Even though one could have been stubborn, we said that every time a person who's tamei eats kachim, he's always going to be metama the kachim when he touches it. Taisus says it could be he doesn't. Why does that have to be the case? Why can you have someone sticks a chopstick in it and puts it into his mouth without him touching it?
This type of situation before where
the person stuck out a pole and without touching. We had by the bird, by the nivlis. The nivlis oif tar is only metama bebeis habliya, only when it goes into his throat. So Zaktais is stamba de milsa mayri kra afilu benoisem dlechtet. He says the Chacham is right is because stamba de milsa is normally a person picks something up and puts it into his mouth. He doesn't avoid touching it or picking it up. Okay. So again, this mission is telling us the din. It tells us the basic din is that someone who shechts a carbon bachutz, or if he's mala a carbon bachutz, which we defined as either being zarik the dam, or being makrav the imurim outside of the Beis Hamikdash, yichayiv on both of those things. This is a parsha of psukim in Perak Achrei Mos, Perak Yud Zayin in Vayikra, and the pasuk is basically 9 psukim long, like 10 psukim, 9 psukim long. The first 7 psukim describe, if you'll have a chance, you can look it up. First 7 psukim describe the Isser to Shech Bechutz, and the last 2, Pasuk Zayin, Pasuk Ches and Pasuk Tes, that's the Isser Hala. Asher Yala Oiloi Zevach. That's the second Isser to be Makrav, to be Zerik Zadam, or to be Mala the Emur. So tomorrow. You always need for a person to be chayiv achatas and to be chayiv karas. You need 2 things. But really for chatas, that it's required. The Torah says an einish, and the Torah also has to say don't do it. If you have both of those elements, then you can bring a chatas. So the Gabi, the Isser Halah, which is the second one that's mentioned in the pasuk, the one that there are two psukim. Over there we have both. The Torah says the einish of karas, and it says don't do it. The Torah is saying don't bring it. If he doesn't bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, to say V'aleim time ish Beis Yisrael, a yid from the yid, and u'minager sheyag b'seich, who lives amongst us, yala oilo zevach, who brings the carbon, Vel Pesach Ayil Moed Levienu Las Soisel Hashem, and he doesn't bring it inside to the Beis Hamikdash or to the Mishkan. That person will get kares. And as our Sev Hashem, so Bishlam Halak Sev Einish Sev Azar Sev Pesach Ayil Moed Levienu. So he's going to get that's the Einish because the pasuk finishes off there. And Nechas Yishahu Me'amav. And the Azhara is in a different parsha, in Dvarim. It says, Hisham l'cha pentala l'secha l'cha malka mashatiret. The Torah says, Hisham l'cha, be careful not to bring your carbon, don't be mala your carbon in the wrong place. Whenever you use the words Hisham, be careful, a pen, and don't, be al, and don't. These are all Lashonis that are of Azhara, of a lav, don't do it. So we have for Halah, the pasuk says Karas, and we have a pasuk somewhere else that says Azhar, Elashchita. But the other half, the other thing that is addressed in our Mishnah, that we say if someone shechts b'chutz, Bishlam Einish, we have the Einish Dechsev Pesach Hayil Moed Lo Heviu. That's an earlier pasuk Dalid. And the so we have that the einish is kares. And where's the azhar? Where does the Torah say not to shecht outside of the azhar, outside of the Beis Hamikdash or the Mishkan? Amar Kra la yizbechu oid. The pasuk says in pasuk Zayin in this parasha, you should not shecht, you shouldn't do shchita your karbanos to these other gods that you're running after. So that's it seems we're in good shape. We have Azhara and Einish for both Halah and for shchita. So we need it for a different topic. Needed for entirely different drasha. Where do we know that if someone shechts a carbon for this avodah zarah of makulas, shehu chayev? The avodah zarah of makulas was done in a different way. They would throw things at it. We've had this before. They pile up stones. They make like a little getchka, and they would throw the rocks at it. So how do you know that shechting a carbon, which is not the normal way of being oived makulas that yichayev, the Torah says you shouldn't shecht your karbanos toward this their avodah zarah. Immediately in the Kedarka, and we darshan, since we don't need a pasuk to tell you that being oived avodah zarah in the normal way of being oived avodah zarah, the Torah says, hey, how you have served the other avodah zarah. So the Torah already said that you can't be oived avodah zarah in the normal way of being oived. It tells you like someone who shechts from Arkulis where he's doing something shaloi kedarka. But in any case, this pasuk will yizbechu. I'm sorry, of this pasuk of Pesach Ayil Moed Leheviu is I'm sorry, la yizbechu oid. That pasuk is needed for this drasha about being oived avodah zarah. Amarabba karibei v'lo yizbechu v'karibei v'lo oid. He says there's two separate limudim from the same pasuk. You can learn out both of them. It says lo yizbechu and it says v'lo yizbechu oid. So that tells you two things. First of all, it tells you there's din about that you could yichai for being oived avodah zarah shaloi kedarka, not in the normal way of being oived by bringing a carbon. And also tells you that shechting a regular carbon b'chutz, you're going to be chayiv. It's a lav not to do so. Correct the Gemara, but we still need this pasuk for Safa 2 for it's still not available. This Brisa is analyzing these same sukkim, and it analyzes that the beginning of the parsha is first talking about someone who, during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, once the Beis Hamikdash was built, you're no longer bamas with that at that point also. So if someone was zevech outside the Beis Hamikdash, he's certainly going to be chayiv. He was makdish the behema when the behema was also to be brought outside the Beis Hamikdash, and then he went ahead and he shechted it outside. Shari Einshin Amr, Vel Pesach Ayil Mayir. Shari Einshin Vel Pesach Ayil Mayir. Azhar D'chsev Yisham Alecha Pentala Aloisecha. So that is the Einish and the Azhara for someone who it was during the time of Isra Abamas, and he wasn't allowed to be makdish in the first place to be brought outside. Vikan ve'elach, but from that point on in the pasuk, after this pasuk of Hishamer, which is Hishamer l'cha pentala vayikra, the pasuk Daled, but after that part, Zevachim shekdishim b'shas heter abamas v'krim b'shas isur abamas. The later part of this parsha is talking about someone who was makdish the carbon prior to the Isra Abamas. So when he was makdish it, there was no problem with him having in mind to bring it outside of the Beis Hamikdash. But then the Beis Hamikdash was built, and he's no longer able to bring it outside, and he brought it. He was makriv it outside. Shenem alamana sheyaviu b'nei Yisrael es zevachim asher him zevachim. Zevachim shetach, which is mashma asher him zevachim zevachim shetach loch kvar. That in order the Yidden should bring their karbonis to the Beis Hamikdash, it means even those that they had previously been able to bring outside of the Beis Hamikdash, meaning they were makdish it during the time of the Bamas. So we learn the Torah says al pnei asada. It's as if when you bring a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash, when Bamas are also, even though you are makdish the carbon, the chas heter Bamas, Torah is going to treat it as if you brought it a pnei asada, as if you brought it for an avodah zarah. And the pasuk continues, "Ve'vium l'Hashem zu mitzvah say, ve'vium l'Hashem." That's a mitzvah say that you shouldn't bring the carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Loisas aminayim. Where do we see a loisas? Tamalaima well yizuchoid. Yachal yehei anish karas. I might think there's an anish of karas for the tamalaima chukas oilam tia zois lahem lereisem zois lahem. Only the actual that when someone brings a carbon at bechutz where he had been makdish it during the time of Isser Bamas, is there going to be a chi of karas, but we're excluding where there was a heter Bamas at the beginning. But in any case, from this whole long brisa, we're learning this new din of the difference between a carbon that was hukdash b'shas heter abamas. We see that this pasuk of that we wanted to say yizvachu oid is telling you that that there's a chiyuv for these karbanos that were brought that were mukdash b'shas heter abamas. It's not available to tell the din of shchita. So again, we're back to our original question: where do we see the azhara that one cannot be sheichet? You can't shech the carbon b'chutz. Forgetting about heter abamas, which is a separate limud, this pasuk of yizbuchu oid is there's really two drashas, but one is needed to tell you can't be ovid avodah zara in a shaloi kedarka, and the other one is needed for b'shas heter abamas, that is you're not allowed to, that it was hooked to b'shas heter abamas that you can't be makravet. So where do you know azhara that you can't be shecht something b'chutz? El Amar Kavachim. El Amar of who is this? This Aleph. El Amar Abaya Kavachim. We learn it from a Kavachim. Umama Malcolm Shalei Anish. His ear, if Madach b'makom. If we just said that when you makdish a carbon, shaloi b'shas heter bamas, and then you bring it after the heter bamas that we said, the Torah said you shouldn't do so, makom sha'anash eni din shehizir, a place where we have a chiv karas on it. We said there was no karas for that, but it's a lav. So certainly a place where there is a chiv karas, we're going to be able to learn out that there also is azhara. Amalei Ravina, and the Gemara is going to end up saying, which should occur to you because we've probably seen this 20, 30 times throughout Shas. Ein asir min adin. You can't use a kal v'chaymer to teach you azhara. And that's what's going to be the Gemara is going to in the end reject it because of this. But first, we're going to have to go do it the long way and first go through another bunch of possibilities of why you can't say this kal v'chaymer. Amalei Ravina l'Ravashi. Im kein lo yoyim la b'chaylev. If you say that you could learn out something you could learn out azhara from a kal v'chaymer, let's not. Why do we need to have a lav at all by chaylev with someone who eats chaylev, and say as a kal v'chaymer from nevela? Ma nevela sheyanish. Nevela, eating nevela is not a chiv karas. It's just a lav. But the Torah said a lav. You can't eat nevela chaylev sheyanish eni din shehizir. Chaylev that has a chiv karas, certainly it should be azhara. So what the Gemara is doing is saying, if you're going to say this concept, you want to say that there must be a lav, an azhara, for shchita b'chutz, because we know that there's a lav for shchita, for being mala b'chutz, even where it was hukdash b'shas hater abamas, where there's no chiv karas. If there's a lav, where there's no chiv karas, certainly there's going to be a lav when there is a chiv karas. So Gemara is saying, if you're going to say that, then let's dispense with a bunch of the lavim that the Torah tells us. Why does the Torah have to tell us a lav by chaylev? We know there's a lav by nevela, even though there's no chiv karas, and chaylev there is a chiv karas, so you shouldn't have to write a lav for it. Also, the kamei de rabba amalei nevela nami leyasha. No, you can't learn it out from nevela. The ikalimifrach malavela shchem mitama. You can't learn it out from nevela because nevela is mitama. So you want to say that because nevela has a lav, even though there's no karas, therefore certainly chaylev does. No, nevela has a chumrah that it can. Nevela has tumah, well, while chaylev is not matama. So Dr. Marcel, let's learn out from shrotzim tmeim that they don't have a chi of karas if you eat them, but they still have, the Torah says a lav on them. So shrotzim tmeim shem matama. You take out the word b'masha because that's really for the next limud. They take it out that you could have the same time on shrotzim that they matama. So Zaktamar Mishratzim Tahirim. Let's learn it out from Shratzim Tahirim. Let's learn out Chaylev, the Isser Chaylev from Shratzim Tahirim, a sheretz that's not one of the Shratzim that the Torah says is a matama. But just also to eat. And if you eat it, there's no chiv karas, but there is a lav. Why don't we say that lav? You'll learn tell you kavachim that Chaylev is also asa, and therefore you should need a lav for Chaylev. No, Shratzim Tahirim. You could also to eat them in a mashu, while chaylev you have to eat a kazayis. So let's learn out from Arlo Klayakarim. The Torah says Allah by Arlo Klayakarim. Let's learn out chaylev from that. Mal Arlo Klayakarim shechein asurim ba'ano. They have isur hano. There's no isur hano on chaylev. Let's learn out from Shvius, right? Shvius, Shemitah, you're only allowed to eat it as long as they are out in the fields. But when there's beer comes in, it becomes aser, and the Torah says it with a lav, ostensibly, even though the Rishonim all try to figure out what is the lav, then it's not clear exactly what is the lav on that, but let's learn out from the lav of Shvius. So the Ma'ala Shvius, Shechein Teisefes Damel. No, Shvius has a chumrah, that Shvius, not only is Shvius also with the lav, if you sell your Shvius, the Isser transfers over to the food, to the money that you bought from selling your Shvius. So that's a chumrah over chaylev. If you sell chaylev to a guy, there's no isser on that money. So let's learn out from truma. There's a lav to eat truma for a yisrael to eat truma. So no, you can't learn out from chaylev. Chaylev has a heter miklala. Chaylev has a heter. What's the heter of chaylev? Chaylev can be mutter if it's a chaylev of a chaya. There's only a lav to eat. You only also to eat the chaylev, the fats of a cow or a sheep. But a deer, if you eat venison, you're allowed to eat the chaylev. You didn't know that. you still the Gid Hanosha, so that's not going to help you with that part, but you don't have to worry about the Chiluk. So Chiluk can't learn out from Truma. So like the Gemara says, and then once you came up with this clever answer, why you can't learn out Chiluk from Truma, you could have answered all the other questions with the same answer that you can learn out Chiluk because it's Hutter Miklala. So this whole line of questioning that we said that you can't learn out from a Kal V'chaimer to tell you Shchitas B'chutz, a lav for Shchita B'chutz from Shchita, from being Mala, where it was Hukdash B'shas Heter Avamis, that's not a kasha. Maybe you could learn that from Kal V'chaimer. Amaravi kashli hadatnan Pesach and Mila mitzvah say. Pesach and Mila are mitzvah say, which have a chiyuv kares. Teisi v'Kal V'chaimer. Let's say that they should also have a lav. We say that Pesach and Mila are unique amongst the. There's 36 things that are mechuyev krisis, and they're also chayiv chatas. We say if you do it b'shayig, if you do it if you do it b'shayig, we say a Pesach and a Mila, their chorus is for a mitzvah saseh, and therefore there's no chiv chatas on them. So the Gemara asks, why is there not a lois saseh also on Pesach and Mila? Mikal v'chaimer, tezer kal v'chaimer, mi moiser, from the isser of leaving over a carbon. Ma moiser shalei anish hizir, leaving over parts of the carbon past their time. The Torah says, don't leave it over, but there's no anish of kares. There's a chiv kares for eating something that was left over. But the actual leaving over, there's no chiv kares on it. And nevertheless, the Torah said, don't do so. There's a lav. Pesach Hamila sha'anish, with a hezer inish kadosh, any din shehezer, the Chayr should certainly have a lav to be chayv achatas. Amar Ravashi, Amishal Shmaisa Kameder of Kahana, Vamali, Moise Leasya, you can't learn out for the Issa. Moise, when you leave something over, once you leave something over, there's no way to undo it. There's no make good on it. Time of Pesach, Pesach, you can bring a Pesach Sheni. So even if you missed the Pesach and you were over on the essay, you could bring the Pesach Sheni and be mechaper on it. So we still left. Why don't we learn out the lav of shchita from a Kal V'chaimer? In fact, can you make azhar min adin? Even according to Mandam, says you can learn out the einish part of a chiyuv. Everyone agrees you can't learn azhar min adin. It's a little strange because, really, that's what we've been talking about. We're trying to do being rayas. Can you learn out from a Kal V'chaimer the azhara? We'll bring all these rayas. We would have thought this was what the discussion was about up until now. And then we say it's just a rule that ein mazhir min adin. So now we're back to our original question. How do we know that shchita, that there's a lav on shechting bachutz? That could be Yochanan. Amar Asya Hava Hava. Learn it out from Gzeira Shava. It says, Pasuk says, "El Pesach HaYomoed lehevi lahakav carbon Lashem v'ei Mishkan Hashem." Dom Yechoshav leishahu dom shafar nichas v'kerev amos. So that's one pasuk by shchita, and it says Hava by the halah. El Pesach HaYomoed levienu lasas Yisrael Hashem v'nichas Hashem me'am. It says Yevienu, which is a lashon Hava. That's talking about halah, and over there we have a lav. So malalon le'anash elam kein hitzer. Just like by halah, we have both an einish and azhara. Avkan, so too by shchita, like anash elam kein hitzer. There's also going to be azhara on that. Learn that from Gzeira Shava, from halah. Rav Amar Kadir Yaina, he says it's a hekish. It's not Gzeira Shava. Rav Yaina, ask sham sham. Even though sham sham sounds like Gzeira Shava, Rashi is clear. The pasuk, this our own parsha where we say both shchita b'chutz and halah b'chutz is we'll makish the two of them together. The Torah says, "Im kim mokom sheyivcha Hashem b'chashetech sham talo yisecha v'sham tasa kol asher anoichi matzavech." So we're makish the two things together. Mal alon le'anish alam kain hizir. Avkan le'anish alam kain hizir. So we learn out from halah to shrita. I think that's what it's talking about. Zaktigma. Ashchan mukterei pnim shehelam b'chutz. So this is a funny lashon. What it really means is something mukterei pnim means something that already had its shchita b'pnim, and you brought it b'chutz, which is what the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi Aglili in the Mishnah was. That the Tanakama said you're going to be chayiv when you're makter b'fnim and helam b'chutz. Mukter chutz shehelam b'chutz minai. How do you know you're chayiv? If you makter b'chutz and then you bring a b'chutz. Amar of Kahana Amar Krav Aleim Timer. So where do we know? The question really on this is we learned how do you know that something that was shechted b'chutz and not it was never brought b'fnim that is going to be a chiyuv karas on azhara on that? Hold on a second. Yeah. Zak Gemara. Amar of Kahana Amar Krav Aleim Toimer Ala Smuchen Toimer. He says we learn it out from a smuchen. The when the pasuk says Beis, where's that pasuk? I'm sorry, this is Vayikra Yizayin Yiches, yeah. Aleim Toimer Ish Ish Mi Beis Yisrael Nagashi Yagub B'Seich V'Shiyala Oilo Yizevach. So this is the second parsha, which says halah. So being makish to two parts. That something that was mukta, that was brought b'chutz, that is also that the shchita was b'chutz. The Torah is saying v'aleim timer. Even in something that had the shchita b'chutz, there's still going to be a chiyuv for being malet b'chutz. So it says aleim timer ala smuchen timer on what was just said. The parsha of shchita is also going to apply when there was a shchita b'chutz. It's also going to apply the halah b'chutz. Maskef l'rava mikse va'alehem. Does it say va'alehem on what we talked about before, on those things that we just discussed, meaning shchita b'chutz? Va'alehem ksev. It says on them, on the people who did it. It's not talking about what you brought, but it's talking about the people, the person who brought something. On those people, they're going to be chayiv kares. El Tana Bei Rabbi Shmuel. We learn that from Tana Bei Shmuel. Aleim Toimer la'arav parshis. It comes from the vav, not from the word aleim, but from the vav. It's coming to put the two parshis together. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asya Hava Hava. We learn it out from Gzer Shava Hava. Mal Alon Mukterei Chutz, Avkan Mukterei Chutz. Just like over there, by the first Hava of Pesach Oyel Moed Le'eviu. It's talking about something that was shechita b'chutz. So too, halah is also talking about where it was shechita b'chutz. Maskular bibi hadatnan shloishim v'sheish krishas b'Torah shloshim v'shav havyin. Why don't we say that there are 30? Why do we say there's only 36 krisos? Let's also include in addition to being mala b'chutz, also where you make a shechita b'chutz. Mala. Because you have both of them. That's a good kasha. Why don't we count this as two? You have a good time. Someone who zayrik mixes dam and bachutz. The Gemara's if someone just does, Rashi explains, that means if someone is supposed to, let's say, be zayrik 4 times on the mizbeach, let's say a chatas. If you zayrik even one of those times, b'chutz, where do we know that you chayiv? Now this is going to say, Rashi explains that even one zurika, it's not really focusing on the mixes, because we know that you're always going to be it's the other zrikas are not ma'akev. It's only the first one that's ma'akev. So once you do one, you're going to be chayiv for halah b'chutz. But where do we know? We said from the beginning that this din of halah includes both being zarik dam and bringing the emurim. So normally being mala means to burn the dam. Where do we know it even includes being zarik the dam? So Gemara nafkalei miditanya dam yechoshev l'rabas hazarik divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael says comes from the words dam yechoshev, which we darshan to mean that the dam is also going to be considered. Zrika's dam is also going to be considered bachutz. It's going to be considered halah bachutz. Kiva oima oy zevach l'rabas hazarik. Torah says oy zevach. When he says oila is zevach, then what do you have to say? If he brings the oila or a zevach, what is it coming to tell you? It's an extra pasuk to tell you, even someone who's there. The Yishmael hay zevach my avat. Like, what does he do with this oy zevach l'chalik? It's coming to tell you don't have to do both oila plus another carbon. It's coming to tell you, are there any carbon that you do b'chutz, you're going to be chayiv for halah. Rabbi Kiva l'chalik minal. What does Rabbi Kiva know l'chalik? Nafkalei miloi heviu. It says loy heviu it. It doesn't say loy hevianu. It doesn't say a lashon of rabbim. It uses a lashon yachid. So that tells you even any one carbon that you bring, you're going to be chayiv. What does he do with loy hevianu or loy heviu? He's only chayiv for bringing makdir bachutz, an entire carbon and not a partial carbon. There's going to be a machlokes later on if that means there has to be a minimum of a kazayis, or if it means you have to do an entire aver, or it means you have to literally bring the entire, you have to be mala the entire aver bachutz. Let's say if you bring an oila, you have to do a whole aver. Rabbi Kiva nafkalei milasas oisai. It says las oisai it. That tells you it can't be al shal muchayev and chayev al chasr. Vishmal chad lemukter ifnim shechasru behelu b'chutz. Chad lemukter ichutz shechasru behelu b'chutz. Yishmael says einachanam. We have lasas oisai and we have lo yeviyanu, but I need both of them because one is telling you something that had a shchita b'fnim lemukter ifnim that had a kosher shchita b'fnim. Then it became chaser. That you're gonna be potter on that. And what does it tell you? If it was if you had the shchita was b'chutz, and then you were makdir it, then you were malit b'chutz, and then if it was a shchita chasera, that it's going to be potter. And we're going to bring you a raya. That's where he learned it out from. Pasuk says, that you're not chayiv for even mukter ifnim if it's chaser. Rabbi Kiva mukter ifnim shechaser b'hela b'chutz chayiv. He doesn't need a pasuk for that because he disagrees. He holds mukter ifnim, something that has a shchitas fnim that was mechuser, you're not going to be chayiv for the exclusion. So he doesn't need two psukim to tell you that they're going to be potter if it's chasru, because he holds mukter ifnim is not going to be chayiv. Now the Gemara turns. So that was all we were explaining according to Rabbi Yishmael. What does he do with Rabbi Akiva's pasuk? Now we have to understand what Rabbi Akiva does with Rabbi Yishmael's pasuk. Rabbi Yishmael, Hai Dam Yechashev, which is where Rabbi Yishmael learned out dam, that the Zrika's dam is going to be chayiv v'hela b'chutz, my avid lay. The Rabbi Shchita Sa'if, it's coming to be marba, not just korbanos, not just animals, but also you chayiv for shechting a oif b'chutz. Yishmael nafkalemi oy asher yishchat. Oy asher yishchat is extra, so it's coming to tell you asher yishchat. It's also coming to tell you a knife. Rabbi Kiva amalach, and we boile ala sheichadu chayev v'loy ala moilek. It's coming to tell you, which is a little counterintuitive. This chiv of shchita b'chutz for an oif means bedavka shchita, not malika. Even though normally the way you bring the way you shecht, the type of shchita that you do for an oif in the Beis Hamikdash is through malika. So one would think that when you do a malika b'chutz, that's when you're going to be chayiv, not when you shecht b'chutz oif. So you know the Torah said bedavka you have to shecht it b'chutz in order to be chayiv for the chorus of shchitas chutz. Yishmael nafkalim is zeh hadavar. Says zeh hadavar bedavka the way it's described. The Torah describes shchita. So on the oif also, it's going to be bedafka shricha. The Tanya Yitzchak ein riel shreichet behema shrechet oif minayin. I would only tell you shchitas behema. How do you know shchitas oif as well? Tamalay ma'oy asher yishchat. Yachal af ha'moilek. I might think even the moilek is going to be chayiv. V'dinu ma'ashkita she'ein derech hasher b'fnim chayiv malika she'derech hasher b'fnim ein edin shu chayiv. I would say certainly malika you should be chayiv for doing it b'chutz. Tamalay ma'zeh hadavar. So zeh hadavar tells you only shchita, which is what the Torah describes, and not malika. This is no. This zeh is needed for entirely different things. Zeh shava about legabi hataras nadarim, unrelated to this. Okay, we're going to stop over here.